She woke up that morning feeling the usual heaviness in her chest. Life had been moving fast, but somehow she felt stuck in the middle of it. She got ready quickly, keeping her routine simple because she did not want to waste time thinking about things she could not change. She put on her coat, grabbed her bag, and stepped out into the chilly morning air. The streets were wet from last night's rain, and the scent of wet earth mixed with the faint smell of coffee from the cafes along the way. She pulled her coat tighter and walked briskly, hoping to catch a cab or reach her usual cafe before the rush of the day fully began. He was sitting inside that same cafe she often went to, alone at a corner table. His hands rested on a worn notebook, and he seemed completely absorbed in his thoughts. He was a stranger, of course, someone she had never seen before. Yet there was something about him. It's maybe the way he held himself, or the quiet way he observed people around him, that made him hard to ignore. He looked lonely, not in a sad, dramatic way, but like a person who carried invisible burdens no one could see. His eyes were deep and thoughtful, scanning the room occasionally, but never landing on anyone for too long. It was the kind of presence that made you notice, even if you did not want to. She entered the cafe and found herself hesitating at the entrance. The warm air smelled of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked bread. She smiled faintly at the barista, who nodded back, already preparing her usual order. As she turned to find a seat, her eyes met his for just a fraction of a second. It was fleeting, but in that instant, it felt like a spark, a quiet acknowledgement of someone existing in the same space. She shook her head slightly, telling herself it was nothing, and moved to an empty table near the window. Rain began to fall again outside, soft and rhythmic against the glass. She pulled out her notebook and tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept wandering back to the stranger. He had returned to his notebook, writing something with concentration. Occasionally he would pause and stare out the window as if the rain had unlocked a memory he was holding on to. She wondered what stories he had, what had brought him to this cafe on a rainy morning, and why he seemed so distant from the world around him. The cafe slowly filled with people, the quiet morning turning into a soft hum of conversations and clinking cups. She noticed him glance around from time to time, and she realized he was observing everyone without being noticed. There was something gentle about the way he moved, careful, as if he did not want to disturb anyone. She found herself intrigued, wanting to know more about this person she had never met. After a while, a small mishap occurred. A woman at a nearby table accidentally knocked over her coffee cup, spilling the warm liquid on the floor. She jumped up to help, and so did the stranger. He moved quickly, picking up the napkins from the floor and helping the woman clean up. She watched him, noticing the quiet kindness in his actions. There was no need for praise or acknowledgement. He just helped, and then returned to his seat without a word. That simple act stayed with her, a small glimpse into who he might be. She sipped her coffee, trying to shake off the curiosity that was slowly turning into something more. She told herself not to overthink it. He was just a stranger after all. But she could not help but steal glances, noticing the way he wrote, the way he looked out the window, and the slight furrow of his brow when he concentrated. She wondered what he was thinking, what kind of life he led, and why he seemed so closed off, yet so present at the same time. Minutes passed, and the rain continued to fall in soft sheets outside. She found herself imagining conversations with him, what she might say if she dared to speak. The idea made her both nervous and excited. She had not felt this way about anyone in a long time, and the fact that she barely knew him made it all the more intense. There was a magnetic pull she could not explain, an unspoken connection she felt across the room. He noticed her looking once or twice, and there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He did not approach, and she did not either. They remained in their own spaces, separated by the hum of the cafe, yet connected in a quiet, intangible way. She wondered if he felt the same curiosity, the same subtle pull that she did. There was a strange comfort in the shared silence, in knowing that someone else in the room was not just passing through, but existed with a kind of quiet intensity that mirrored her own. Her phone buzzed, pulling her back to reality. She had a message from work, reminding her of a meeting she had almost forgotten. She sighed, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her again. She packed up her things slowly, reluctant to leave the warmth of the cafe and the presence of the stranger. She realized that sometimes life offered brief moments that felt significant, even if nothing more came of them. As she walked out into the rain, she glanced back, half expecting to see him watching her leave. But he was still inside, writing in his notebook, lost in his thoughts. She smiled faintly, feeling a mixture of disappointment and curiosity. That brief encounter, though fleeting, had already made an impression on her. She wondered if their paths would cross again, if the moment they had shared in silence could ever grow into something more. He felt the weight of that brief interaction. He had noticed her, of course, but he had told himself it was nothing more than a passing glance. Yet the way she carried herself, the slight nervous energy mixed with quiet confidence, had lingered in his mind. He found himself replaying her expressions, her small gestures, the way her eyes had briefly met his. For someone who rarely let anyone in, the moment felt significant, even if he could not explain why. The rain fell steadily outside, and he closed his notebook for a moment, staring out the window. He thought about the unusual sense of familiarity he had felt in her presence, a strange comfort he had not expected. It was a reminder that life could surprise him, that even strangers could leave a mark, however subtle, on his heart. He shook his head lightly, returning to his writing, but the thought of her stayed, weaving into his day in a way that made him feel both unsettled and intrigued. Back on the streets, she walked slowly, letting the rain soak through her coat. She thought about the stranger, about how a few minutes of shared space could feel heavier than hours spent with people she knew. She did not know his story, and perhaps she never would, but the encounter had sparked something inside her. It was a small reminder that even in ordinary life, unexpected moments could create ripples that lingered far longer than expected. The day continued, but her thoughts kept returning to the cafe, to him, and to the small spark of connection that had been ignited. She went through her routine, but her mind wandered, replaying details she did not usually notice. The way he had helped that woman with the spilled coffee, the careful way he had written in his notebook, and the brief flicker of acknowledgement when their eyes met stayed with her. He left the cafe later, carrying his notebook under his arm. He walked slowly, not rushing, taking in the sounds and sights of the rainy city. His mind kept returning to her, to the quiet curiosity she had sparked in him, feeling he had not experienced in a long time. For the first time in months, maybe even years, he felt the gentle pull of anticipation, the subtle hope that someone he barely knew could matter in ways he had not imagined. Neither of them knew if they would see each other again. Life was unpredictable, full of unexpected encounters and missed opportunities. Yet, in that moment, each carried a small, unspoken hope that the other existed beyond just that fleeting morning. The stranger had left a mark, and she had left a mark. And the thought of their paths crossing again was quietly thrilling. The city moved around them. People rushing to work, taxis splashing through puddles, and the rain falling steadily. But within the chaos, two hearts had found a brief stillness, a quiet connection that neither could ignore. It was the beginning of something unspoken, a story that had not yet started, but whose roots were already taking hold in the depths of their minds and hearts. Each carried the memory of that morning, the smell of coffee, the sound of rain, and the presence of a stranger who had unknowingly changed the rhythm of their day. A few days later, the woman found herself walking toward the same cafe, almost without thinking. Something about that rainy morning had stayed with her, lingering in her mind like the echo of a soft song she could not forget. She told herself it was silly, that it was just a stranger she had noticed briefly. But curiosity has a way of growing quietly, even when reason tries to silence it. She entered the cafe and noticed the familiar smell of coffee and fresh pastries. The barista greeted her with a nod, and she returned the gesture. Feeling a small comfort in the routine, she scanned the room, her eyes moving across the tables, and then she saw him. He was sitting in his usual corner, his notebook open in front of him, pen in hand. His posture was calm, almost absorbed in thought, yet there was a certain awareness in the way he glanced around. Their eyes met for a brief second, and she felt a flutter of recognition and surprise. She told herself to remain calm, but her heart beat a little faster. He nodded slightly, not in a forced or exaggerated way, but with a quiet acknowledgement. It was enough to make her feel noticed, yet still safe behind the distance of the cafe tables. She found a seat nearby, close enough that they could see each other, yet far enough to allow space. She pulled out her notebook, pretending to focus on her own writing, but she could not help stealing glances at him. He scribbled in his notebook, pausing occasionally to gaze out the window at the rain falling softly. There was a concentration in his eyes that made her wonder what he was thinking about. What words or thoughts were hidden behind that calm exterior? She felt an unfamiliar excitement mixed with nervousness. An eagerness to know him, yet afraid of disrupting the quiet he seemed to cherish. Days turned into weeks, and their meetings at the cafe became something both of them quietly anticipated. She no longer felt the nervous hesitation she had during their first conversation. Instead, she felt a calm curiosity, eager to see how much of the world she could learn through him. Each time she arrived, she would glance at his usual corner, and he would be there, pen in hand, notebook open, as if waiting for the next shared moment to begin. Their conversations, once light and casual, began to dig deeper into the things that mattered to them. They talked about their childhoods, sharing memories that had shaped them in ways they rarely told anyone else. She discovered he had grown up in a quiet town where life moved slowly but often brought its own challenges. He spoke of moments of loneliness and times when he felt misunderstood, but also of small joys that had left lasting impressions. She listened carefully, noticing the way his eyes softened when he spoke of happy memories, and the slight tension in his hands when he recalled difficult times. She realized that he had built walls around his heart, not out of arrogance, but from self-preservation, a shield against disappointment and pain. She, in turn, shared her own experiences. She spoke of struggles that had made her feel isolated, times when she had doubted herself, and moments of unexpected kindness that had given her hope. He listened intently, asking thoughtful questions without judgment, allowing her to speak freely. She felt a rare sense of being understood, the kind that does not require explanation or defense. It was as if, in sharing these stories, they were both slowly lowering the walls that life had built around them. Their laughter became more frequent, a natural part of their interactions. Small jokes, shared observations about people in the cafe, or amusing mishaps on the street became opportunities to connect. Each laugh was gentle and unforced, a reflection of comfort rather than performance. In these moments, she noticed his reserved demeanor softening, the careful distance giving way to subtle warmth and playfulness. He noticed her ease, the way she smiled without hiding behind politeness or hesitation, and he felt a growing admiration for her openness and authenticity. One afternoon, the conversation took a more serious turn. He hesitated before speaking, as if weighing the words carefully. "I don't usually open up to people like this," he said quietly, "but I feel like I can talk to you." "It's different. You make it easier somehow," she nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. "I feel the same," she admitted. "Sometimes it takes one person to make you feel like the world isn't so heavy. You just listen in a way that matters." The air between them shifted, charged with a recognition of mutual trust. It was a fragile connection, but one built on honesty and respect, something both had longed for without realizing it. As the weeks passed, they began to share more of their daily lives. He would talk about the small challenges he faced at work, and she would offer encouragement without patronizing him. She would recount moments from her day, and he would listen, occasionally giving advice, sometimes just offering a comforting presence. The simplicity of these exchanges carried a profound weight, a subtle understanding that they were both willing to invest attention and care into each other's lives. The cafe became their sanctuary. They would sit for hours, sometimes talking, sometimes simply sharing the silence. In those quiet moments, they discovered a rhythm that needed no words, a mutual presence that was calming and affirming. The clinking of cups, the soft music playing in the background, the occasional laughter from nearby tables all became part of the shared atmosphere that bound them together. Each encounter strengthened the invisible thread connecting them, a bond that was growing steadily and naturally. He began to share his thoughts and dreams more openly, revealing layers of himself that had been hidden for years. He spoke of ambitions he had once set aside, fears he had learned to live with, and the lessons life had taught him about resilience and patience. She listened, genuinely fascinated by his perspective, and sometimes offered her own insights, gently challenging him when necessary, but always with empathy. The dynamic between them became a balance of giving and receiving, a partnership of understanding rather than dependence. She noticed small changes in him that indicated the walls around his heart were beginning to crumble. He would make eye contact more readily, his smiles became more frequent, and he shared small gestures of care, like remembering what she liked to drink or commenting on something she had mentioned weeks earlier. These little actions spoke louder than any words could, signaling that he was beginning to trust her, beginning to value her presence in his life. She too felt her own heart opening, responding to his quiet attention and the sincerity behind his actions. One rainy afternoon, a man dropped a book near their table, startling them both. They instinctively reached to help, hands brushing slightly. This minor incident, repeated in their lives through small shared experiences, became a metaphor for their growing connection. Life's little accidents and coincidences seemed to place them in the same space repeatedly, as if the universe were conspiring to keep them close. Each encounter, no matter how mundane, reinforced their bond and made their connection feel more intentional and meaningful. The deeper they went into their conversations, the more they realized the similarities in their experiences and values. Both had faced moments of doubt and pain. Both had learned the importance of empathy and listening. And both had slowly discovered that human connection could heal even the quietest wounds. The recognition of these parallels brought a profound comfort, a sense that they were not alone in the way they viewed the world. Their shared understanding became a foundation, solid and dependable, allowing trust and warmth to flourish. They also began to share dreams and fears about the future. He admitted he had been hesitant to open his heart to anyone because he feared disappointment. She revealed her own worries about trusting too quickly, about hoping for something that might not last. Yet, in their conversations, these fears became lighter, shared between them and softened by understanding and encouragement. The exchange of vulnerability was not rushed or forced. It was deliberate, careful, and respectful, creating a space where both felt safe to be themselves. During one of their afternoons together, he asked a question that caught her off guard. Do you ever feel like someone can just appear in your life and change everything without you even realizing it at first? She looked at him, sensing the depth behind the question. Yes, she replied softly. Sometimes the smallest encounters have the biggest impact. It can be quiet, almost unnoticed at first, but later you realize things are different. He nodded, a subtle smile forming on his lips. I think that's happening with us, he said, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. The words were simple, but the meaning was profound, acknowledging a growing connection neither had fully named yet, as weeks turned into months. The consistency of their meetings, the depth of their conversations, and the shared silences all contributed to a growing sense of closeness. They had moved beyond the awkward curiosity of strangers to a place of familiarity and trust. Each encounter reinforced the bond, allowing them to explore the nuances of each other's personalities, the quirks and habits that made them human and real. The small acts of kindness, the attentiveness, the gentle humor all created a tapestry of connection that felt natural and unforced. One evening, as the cafe was closing and the rain had stopped, they walked outside together. The streets glistened with reflections of city lights on puddles, and the cool air carried the freshness of the evening. They walked side by side, not needing to fill the silence with words, each comfortable in the other's presence. It was in these ordinary, unremarkable moments that the extraordinary nature of their bond became most evident. The ease of companionship, the mutual understanding, and the quiet joy of sharing time together all spoke louder than any declaration could. By now, he no longer viewed her as just another person he had met in a cafe. She had become someone he looked forward to seeing, someone whose opinions and presence mattered in ways he had not expected. She, too, felt her world expanding through him, discovering dimensions of thought, empathy, and patience she had not fully explored before. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. a gentle evolution that was unfolding naturally. Without pressure or expectation, as they said goodbye that evening, there was a lingering sense of anticipation, a quiet promise in the unspoken understanding that they would meet again. Both were aware of the growing depth of their connection, yet neither forced a label or rushed the process. The beauty of it lay in its gradual unfolding, the trust building piece by piece, allowing the heart to respond in its own time. They parted with a final glance, a shared smile, and a feeling that this was no longer a casual acquaintance, but the start of something meaningful and lasting. Time passed slowly, the cafe filling with a gentle hum of voices and clinking cups. A few people entered and left, but their small corner remained a bubble of calm, as if the rest of the world had softened around them. She noticed the small details, how he adjusted his pen when it slipped, the subtle way he tapped his fingers on the table, and the occasional deep breath he took before returning to his writing. Each movement spoke of a quiet thoughtfulness, a presence that was deliberate and unhurried. She felt drawn to it, a curiosity that urged her to reach out, to start a conversation, yet something held her back. She did not want to appear intrusive or impatient. Then an opportunity presented itself. A young man sitting near them accidentally dropped his phone and it slid across the floor. Both of them reacted at the same time, bending down to pick it up. Their hands almost touched, and they exchanged a brief glance, each surprised by the shared instinct. He smiled faintly, and she returned the smile, feeling the ice of hesitation slowly melting. That small, shared moment sparked a sense of connection, an unspoken acknowledgement that they could interact without fear. It was gentle, subtle, yet enough to open the door to what might come next. Encouraged by the small moment, she gathered her courage and spoke softly. "Is that your notebook? Do you write often?" Her voice was hesitant, unsure if she should interrupt his concentration, but she hoped he would respond. He looked up at her, a little startled at first, then relaxed. "Yes, I do," he replied quietly. "It helps me think, organize my thoughts." There was no pretense in his words, no attempt to impress. It was simple and honest, and she found herself appreciating the straightforwardness. She nodded, feeling a warmth in the exchange. "I sometimes do the same," she admitted, opening her notebook to show a few lines of writing. He glanced at it, and a small smile appeared on his lips. "Interesting," he said softly, and for the first time she noticed a subtle shift in his demeanor. He seemed more open, willing to engage, yet still measured. Careful not to rush into the conversation, they continued talking slowly at first. The topics were small and ordinary books they liked, the weather, the cafes they frequented. But as the minutes passed, the conversation deepened. She shared small stories from her life, moments of quiet struggle and small joys. And he listened with genuine interest, occasionally nodding or asking gentle questions. There was a rhythm to their exchange, a balance between speaking and listening, giving space while remaining present. Each word felt significant, not because of grand declarations, but because of the honesty underlying them. He began to reveal small pieces of himself, tiny glimpses into his life. He spoke of places he had traveled, experiences that shaped him, and thoughts he rarely shared with anyone. His voice was calm, measured, but there was a hint of vulnerability that made her heart ache a little. She realized that beneath the reserved exterior, there was a person who had lived through moments of pain, of loneliness, yet still carried a gentle hope. She felt a connection growing, not instant or overwhelming, but subtle and persistent, like a seed slowly taking root. She noticed his eyes soften when he spoke about memories that brought both joy and sadness. He laughed quietly at small stories, and she found herself smiling genuinely, enjoying the warmth of the interaction. There was no pretense, no expectation, only two people sharing a space, sharing words, and in that sharing, beginning to understand each other. The world outside the cafe seemed to fade, the rain tapping softly against the windows, creating a gentle background to their conversation. Hours could have passed, or perhaps only a few minutes. Time felt suspended in the quiet bubble they had created. They spoke about dreams, hopes, fears, and the small challenges of everyday life. She discovered that he had a thoughtful and reflective mind, someone who looked beyond the surface and cared about the small details of the world. He realized that she had a depth of empathy, an ability to listen and respond without judgment. In that shared space, both felt a subtle shift, a growing awareness that they were not just talking, but connecting. The barista brought them a fresh cup of coffee each, and they thanked him without breaking the flow of conversation. Each sip seemed to deepen the comfort between them. The simple act of sharing a table and a moment feeling extraordinary in its quiet significance. She laughed at a small joke he made, and he responded with a gentle smile that reached his eyes, lighting them in a way she had not seen before. It was the first time she noticed a warmth behind the calmness, a hint of playfulness that balanced his quiet demeanor. As the rain outside began to lighten, she realized that she had spent more time talking to this stranger than she usually allowed herself with people she knew well. Yet it felt natural, effortless, and rewarding. She felt seen not for appearances or actions, but for the thoughts she shared and the person she was behind the quiet exterior. He, too, felt an unfamiliar lightness, a curiosity that had grown into a desire to know more, to understand, and to be understood. When she finally glanced at her watch, she was surprised by how much time had passed. She had expected a brief moment, a quick coffee, and maybe some small conversation. But they had spoken for hours, each moment deepening the connection. She packed up her notebook, feeling a small pang of reluctance. She did not want the conversation to end, yet she knew life would pull her away. She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw a genuine acknowledgement of what had transpired, a recognition of the bond they had started to form. He gathered his notebook as well, and they both stood, unsure if they should leave together or part ways. The moment was delicate, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. She took a small step closer and said softly, "It was nice talking with you." He nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. "It was more than I expected," he replied. The words were simple, but the meaning was profound. Carrying the weight of the connection they had forged, they walked out of the cafe together, sharing the brief shelter of the awning as the rain had mostly stopped. The streets glistened with puddles, reflecting the soft city lights, and the air carried a fresh, earthy scent. They walked side by side, not needing to fill the silence with words, letting the comfort of shared presence speak for them. It was a small, ordinary moment, yet it held extraordinary significance. The start of something neither had anticipated. Before parting ways, they exchanged a simple plan to meet again, neither putting pressure nor expectations on the future. It was a quiet agreement, a mutual understanding that their paths had crossed for a reason, and that reason deserved attention. She felt a small flutter of hope, a gentle anticipation of what might come next. He felt a similar sense of curiosity, a warmth that had begun to grow from their shared moments, a feeling that life could offer unexpected joys even in the most ordinary of places, as they walked in opposite directions. Each felt a lingering sense of connection, a thread that tied them together beyond that day. She thought about the conversations, the small laughter, and the moments of understanding that had made the time feel both fleeting and significant. He replayed the shared words, the glances, and the quiet comfort of being in the presence of someone who understood without judgment. The day moved on, but the memory of that afternoon stayed, quietly embedding itself in their hearts. Neither knew what the future held, yet both recognized that something meaningful had begun. A bond formed not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through simple, honest conversation. The stranger was no longer just a figure in a corner. He had become someone whose presence mattered, someone whose words and silence had shifted the rhythm of their day. And in that shift, they both discovered that a single encounter could change the way they saw the world and each other. One afternoon, as she walked toward the cafe, she noticed the sky darkened with heavy clouds. The streets were wet, the smell of rain lingering in the air, and the city moved slower under the gray sky. She hurried inside, shaking off her coat, and noticed him sitting at his usual corner table. He looked more pensive than usual, his notebook open but his pen still. She hesitated for a moment, sensing something was different, then walked toward him with a cautious smile. "Hey," she said softly. "You seem thoughtful today. Everything okay? He looked up, surprised, as if she had noticed the subtle tension in his posture. He gave a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's nothing really," he said quietly, closing his notebook. She knew that tone. It was the one people used when they didn't want to share, when something weighed on them too heavily. She pulled out a chair and sat down, hoping her presence might encourage him to open up. For a few moments, they sat in silence, the cafe humming softly around them. Finally, he sighed and spoke, his voice low but steady. "I received some news today, something from my past. I thought I had moved on, but it seems it's not that simple." She nodded, sensing the importance of his words without pressing for details he wasn't ready to share. "I understand," she said gently. "Sometimes the past has a way of catching up, even when we think we're safe. You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready, but I'm here to listen if you do." He looked at her, and for the first time in weeks he seemed vulnerable in a way that made her heart ache. "I don't want to burden you with it," he said. She shook her head quickly. "You're not a burden. We all have struggles, and sharing them doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Her words seemed to calm him slightly. He took a deep breath and began to speak, slowly and carefully, about the event that had shaken him. It was personal, something he had hidden for a long time. Revealing it was clearly difficult. As he spoke, she listened attentively, never interrupting, never judging. Occasionally, she would nod or offer a comforting word, letting him know she understood. The conversation was heavy, but it was also a turning point. He realized that he could be honest without fear of rejection, and she realized how much he had begun to trust her presence. Their connection, already deep, grew stronger in the quiet acknowledgement of vulnerability. After a while, he fell silent, exhausted from revealing so much. She reached across the table, gently touching his hand. "Thank you for trusting me," she said softly. He looked at her hand, then into her eyes and nodded. "It's not easy for me, but it feels different talking to you. I feel lighter somehow." The small admission hung between them, fragile, yet meaningful. He was beginning to see that sharing pain could bring relief, not judgment, and that human connection could be a source of healing. They stayed in the cafe longer that day, talking about lighter things to balance the heaviness of the previous conversation. They shared small stories, laughed at minor observations, and allowed the conversation to flow naturally. The shift in their dynamic was subtle, but profound. He was no longer just a man guarded by his own walls. He was someone willing to open up, to trust, and to feel. She was no longer just a curious woman. She was someone who mattered in his world, someone who could help him navigate the complexities of his own heart. In the following days, they continued to meet regularly. Each meeting was filled with small discoveries about each other. Gentle humor, shared experiences, and the ongoing exchange of thoughts and feelings. They had both grown comfortable with the silence between them, understanding that it was not emptiness, but a shared presence that spoke volumes. The cafe had become their haven, a place where they could be themselves without pretense or fear. One afternoon, he hesitated before speaking, a seriousness in his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about this connection we have. I don't want to rush anything, but I realize that my feelings have changed. I feel something more than just friendship, more than just comfort." She looked at him, a mixture of surprise and warmth filling her chest. "I feel the same," she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The acknowledgement was quiet, but it carried immense significance. They had crossed an invisible line, recognizing that what had begun as simple conversations and shared moments had grown into something deeper. The next few days were a careful dance of discovery. They were both aware of their feelings, but took care not to rush the other. They continued to meet, talk, laugh, and share, each encounter reinforcing the growing bond. The small gestures, the way he remembered her favorite drink, the way she noticed when he seemed troubled, became symbols of care and attention. Their relationship was evolving naturally, without pressure or expectation, allowing both hearts to adjust and respond. Then, one evening, a misunderstanding occurred. He misinterpreted something she said, and it caused a brief tension between them. The words were not harsh, but the silence that followed was heavy with unspoken feelings. She felt a pang of disappointment, wondering if she had misread the connection they had built. He felt a mixture of confusion and frustration, unsure how to bridge the gap without overstepping. After a while, she decided to reach out. She sent a message, gentle and sincere, explaining her intention and apologizing for any misunderstanding. He read it and felt a wave of relief, realizing that the connection they had was strong enough to withstand minor missteps. They met the next day, and he spoke first. "I'm sorry for misunderstanding," he said, his voice calm but earnest. "I don't want to let something small affect what we have." She smiled, feeling the tension dissolve. "Neither do I," she replied. The brief moment of conflict became a testament to the strength of their bond, a reminder that trust and communication were essential. Their conversation that day turned into one of the most meaningful exchanges they had shared. He spoke openly about his fears, his concerns about opening his heart fully, and the ways he had been hurt in the past. She listened with empathy, offering understanding and reassurance without pushing him. In turn, she shared her own fears, the doubts that lingered despite her growing feelings. The honesty of the moment created a space where both felt safe, understood, and accepted. As the rain fell lightly outside, they walked together, sharing the quiet comfort of companionship. The streets glistened with reflections, and the cool air carried a sense of calm. They talked about the future in a gentle way, not making promises but expressing hopes, desires, and intentions. Each step they took together reinforced the connection, the trust, and the budding love that had grown from simple conversations and shared moments. He realized that she had changed him in ways he had not expected. Her presence had softened the edges of his guarded heart, allowing him to feel, to trust, and to hope. She realized that he had shown her the value of patience, understanding, and seeing someone for who they truly are. Together, they were discovering a new rhythm, a way of being that was grounded in mutual respect, care, and genuine affection. In the days that followed, their bond continued to deepen. They shared ordinary moments, the quiet of a rainy afternoon, the warmth of a cup of coffee, the small laughter at life's minor absurdities, each moment layering trust, intimacy, and connection. They learned to navigate misunderstandings with care, to communicate openly, and to cherish the small, meaningful gestures that made their relationship unique. Their connection was no longer just a series of conversations. It had become a living, breathing presence in both their lives. One evening, as they sat together in the now familiar corner of the cafe, he looked at her with a quiet intensity. "I don't know what the future holds," he said softly, "but I know that I want to face it with you. You've changed the way I see so many things, and I don't want to lose that." She smiled, feeling the depth of his words. "I feel the same," she replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. In that moment, they both understood that their connection had evolved into something profound, a relationship built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. The rain outside began to ease, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of the city lights. They walked out together, side by side, letting the silence speak for them. Each step felt significant, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had taken together, the moments of laughter, the shared vulnerabilities, the gentle understanding that had transformed a strangers into something more. It was a turning point, a moment of clarity where both recognized that their hearts had changed, and that change was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The days continued to pass, each one carrying a subtle excitement that neither of them could ignore. Their meetings became more than a routine. They were moments of genuine joy, of shared silence, of understanding without words. The cafe had witnessed their journey, from initial glances and brief exchanges to deep conversations and unspoken trust. It had become a silent companion to the evolution of their bond, a space that held the memory of laughter, shared fears, and the soft warmth of connection. One afternoon, the woman arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. The air was crisp with the first hints of autumn. The streets carried a subtle fragrance of fallen leaves, mixed with the lingering scent of rain. She found him at his usual corner table, notebook open, pen poised as if he had been waiting. Their eyes met, and a gentle smile passed between them. No words were needed. The comfort of familiarity spoke volumes. She slid into the chair across from him, and for a few moments they simply existed together, letting the presence of the other fill the space. Conversation began slowly, flowing naturally, as it always did. They spoke about the changing seasons, the small joys of life, and the little quirks they had discovered in each other over time. He teased her lightly about her penchant for always ordering the same coffee, and she laughed, appreciating the warmth behind his words. There was a rhythm to their exchanges, a flow that was both soothing and exciting. Each conversation reinforced the bond they had built, a relationship that had grown from the simplicity of shared moments into something deep and meaningful. Over time, their discussions moved to more personal topics, though the atmosphere remained light and comfortable. He shared stories of his childhood that he had never spoken aloud, revealing dreams, fears, and lessons learned. She listened with a gentle attentiveness that made him feel seen, understood, and appreciated. In turn, she shared her own experiences, her hopes for the future, and her moments of vulnerability. Each revelation, each shared piece of their inner worlds, created a stronger thread between them. Trust and openness had become the foundation of their relationship, and they both cherished it. The stranger, once a figure of quiet observation, had transformed into someone who could share his heart without fear. She had changed him in ways he had never expected, showing him that connection could bring healing, that vulnerability could be met with compassion, and that love could be gentle, steady, and real. She realized that he had taught her the value of patience, understanding, and the beauty of discovering a person slowly, layer by layer. Together, they were learning the art of a relationship built on honesty, respect, and quiet devotion. Their moments together were not always filled with words. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, watching the world move around them. A child laughing outside, the soft hum of traffic, the distant barking of a doggish sound became a part of their shared experience. In these quiet moments, they discovered the power of presence, unspoken communication that passed between two hearts in sync. It was in these small, ordinary experiences that the extraordinary nature of their connection revealed itself. One evening, as they walked home together under the soft glow of streetlights, he paused and looked at her with a seriousness that made her heart skip a beat. "I've been thinking about us," he said softly. "All this time I've felt something growing between us, something I can't ignore anymore. I don't want to hide it or hold back." She looked at him, a mixture of anticipation and warmth filling her chest. "I feel the same," she admitted, her voice steady but filled with emotion. In that moment, the quiet understanding that had been building over weeks and months crystallized into something undeniable. Their hearts had found a home in each other. They began to explore their connection more openly, sharing the joys of companionship, the small adventures of daily life, and the comfort of knowing someone cared deeply for them. Walks in the park, shared meals, quiet evenings with music and conversation all became meaningful because they were experienced together. Each interaction, no matter how mundane it seemed, carried weight because it was infused with attention, care, and love. Challenges arose, as they always do in life. Misunderstandings, small frustrations, and moments of doubt tested their patience and communication. But they faced these challenges together, learning to navigate the complexities of human emotions with empathy and grace. Each difficulty became an opportunity to strengthen their bond, to understand each other more deeply, and to grow as individuals and as a pair. They discovered that love was not about perfection, but about commitment, understanding, and the willingness to see each other clearly. Even in moments of difficulty, he often surprised her with thoughtful gestures, a favorite pastry brought to the cafe, a note tucked into her bag, a quiet word of encouragement when she seemed weary. She, in turn, found small ways to show care, leaving little reminders of her presence and thoughtfulness. These acts, though simple, became symbols of their growing affection, each one reinforcing the depth of their feelings. They realized that love was found not only in grand declarations, but in the small, consistent actions that spoke volumes. One day, they found themselves sitting by a fountain in a quiet park, the sun setting and casting a warm golden glow over the surroundings. He took her hand in his, a gesture that had grown natural and comforting over time. "I never expected to feel this way about someone I barely knew at first," he said quietly. "But now, I can't imagine my life without you in it." She squeezed his hand gently, feeling the truth and sincerity behind his words. "I feel the same," she replied, her voice soft but confident. The moment was simple, yet it carried the weight of months of connection, trust, and shared experiences. As they continued to spend time together, they began to plan small adventures, discovering new places, trying new foods, and exploring the city with fresh eyes. Each experience was enriched by the presence of the other, their bond growing stronger with every shared moment. They laughed together, supported each other through challenges, and celebrated the small victories of life. Their relationship, once built on curiosity and conversation, had blossomed into a partnership rooted in love, respect, and genuine care. Even the ordinary days held significance. A quiet morning at the cafe, a shared walk under a gentle rain, a conversation about dreams and fears. Its moment was precious because it was experienced together. They had learned to find joy in simplicity, to appreciate the presence of the other, and to value the trust and understanding that had taken root. The connection they had forged was resilient, capable of weathering challenges, and rich with shared meaning. One evening, as they sat together watching the city lights twinkle on, he turned to her and said softly, "Meeting you changed everything. I never knew that a simple conversation with a stranger could lead to this." She smiled, feeling the warmth of his words. "It changed me too," she replied. "It taught me that connection, understanding, and love can come from the most unexpected places." They sat in silence for a while, letting the words and the presence of each other sink in, feeling a quiet contentment that spoke of deep fulfillment. Their journey had begun with a simple glance, a fleeting moment of curiosity, and a few words exchanged in a cafe. Now it had grown into a profound connection, a relationship that brought joy, understanding, and the promise of a shared future. They had discovered that love was not always about grand gestures or dramatic events, but about the consistent presence, attention, and care that nurtured the heart. Each day together was a continuation of the bond that had started so unexpectedly, and both embraced it with gratitude and hope. As the night settled over the city, they walked home together, hand in hand, feeling the quiet strength of their connection. The journey from strangers to companions, from curiosity to love, had been gentle, natural, and deeply meaningful. They knew that challenges might arise, that life would continue to test them, but they also knew that the foundation they had built was strong, grounded in trust, understanding, and genuine affection. In each other, they had found not just a partner, but a home, a source of comfort and joy that made even the simplest moments extraordinary. The story of a stranger and a simple conversation had blossomed into a life shared, a bond nurtured, and a love discovered in the quietest of ways. It was a reminder that human connection, patience, and the courage to be vulnerable could change hearts, transform lives, and create a story that was uniquely their own. And as they continued their journey together, side by side, they knew that what began as a chance encounter had grown into the most meaningful chapter of their lives, filled with hope, trust, and the gentle, enduring power of love.